Your Human and You. Written by Mad Max the Black. Chapter 15. The Horse You Rode In On, Part 1.
Good night, you big doofus.
My heart jumped to my chest as someone knocked on the door. Reaching up, I removed the pillow that Twilight had flung at me from my face. Tossing it aside, I pushed myself up slightly with my arms and stared at the door. Silence had fallen across the library. I held my breath as I slowly rose to my feet, glancing over at Twilight out of the corner of my eye. I saw her staring at me, a look of confusion on her face. "Were you expecting someone?" I asked. She shook her head, eyes darting to the door.
No.
She hissed quietly.
Nobody was supposed to come over tonight.
As she said that, she glanced at the clock on the wall. I just continued staring at the door. Both Twilight and I jumped as the pony pounded on the door again, this time with more force. "Well, someone's here." Sighing, I started inching away from the direction of the door. I didn't think anything bad was going to happen, but I didn't want to be near the door either. It was better to be safer than sorry. "And I don't think they're going to be leaving anytime soon." We both remained in place, staring at the door with bated breath.
Oh, come on.
I heard Twilight mutter to herself after several seconds. Starting once, she shook her head and walked over to the door.
Here we are, acting like scared little fillies after a ghost story.
As she reached the door, the pony on the other side began to pound at the door for all they were worth. As the knocking continued in rapid succession, Twilight's horn flashed brightly. The door handle was immediately encased in her magical aura, and she turned it quickly, flinging the door open wide. There was a brief silence as she studied whoever was on the other side of the door. Due to my position in the room, I was unable to get a good look at our guest. Twilight in the door blocked my view.
Hi, my name is Sunny Breeze. Can I come in?
My whole body froze as a familiar voice drifted into the library from the open door. Sunny Breeze, one of the original ponies who had found me again. How the hell did she know where I was? Twilight didn't fare any better. A confused look on her face, and her mouth opening and closing as she stared out the door at Sunny.
I'm sorry, what?
She stuttered, trying to figure out exactly what was going on. Still hidden the view by the door, I waved my arms in the air, trying to get Twilight's attention. "She's the pony who found me in the desert when I first arrived." I sighed quickly and quietly when she finally glanced over to me. Her eyes widened and her pupils shrank. Barely nodding her head, she faced the door open again and moved aside, motioning for Sunny to enter. I moved quickly to a large cushion in the corner and collapsed upon it.
I'm sorry. Please come in.
Twilight said, composing herself quickly. As Sunny slipped past Twilight and entered the library, I felt my breath catch in my throat. She looked horrible. Her mane was disheveled and unkempt, tangled up with knots with strands sticking out at odd angles. Her blue coat was matted and filthy. She looked like she hadn't had anything decent to eat in weeks. Her ribs were clearly visible through her coat, and her spine stood out along her back. The feathers on her wings were a chaotic mess, sticking out in all directions in a way that looked quite painful. Her fetlocks were long and dirty, nearly covering her hooves completely. She looked like she had been to hell and back. As she made her way into the library, I noticed that she was limping heavily, favoring her back right hoof. Limping to the center of the room, her violet eyes took in every detail, scanning the room quickly. She caught sight of me and the look of recognition dawned on her face, her eyes widening. I only had a split second to ready myself before she was upon me.
Oh, sweet Celestia, yes!
She cried, nuzzling to my chest as she squeezed the life out of me.
I finally found you again!
I grunted, struggling for air as her legs wrapped tighter around me, almost as if she was afraid I'd slip away if she wasn't careful. I could feel my ribs begin to creak and groan under the pressure. I looked over to Twilight, silently pleading for help.
Can I help you?
She asked, clearing her throat. Sunny jumped, obviously forgetting Twilight was still there. Smiling sheepishly, she jumped down off of me, wincing as she placed weight on her injured hoof. I breathed a sign of relief as sweet oxygen filled my lungs again.
um, sorry.
Ruffling her uncut feathers, she took a deep breath, trying to retain what little dignity she still had.
My name is Sunny Breeze, and I represent a group of human breeders and sellers. I was just stopping by to make sure that our humans were being treated with care and the respect they deserve.
She gave Twilight a large smile as she shifted nervously in her hooves.
Oh, you mean the same group that is currently wanted for human abuse?
Twilight said impassively, slamming and locking the door behind her. Sunny's smile vanished instantly and she swallowed.
How do you know that?
She squeaked, ears playing back.
I am a princess of Equestria.
As Twilight slowly approached, Sunny scrambled backwards in panic.
It's my job to know. Wait, it's not what you think.
She cried out, waving her hooves in front of her.
I can explain. Your caravan is wanted for several counts of abuse, as well as selling humans without a license.
Twilight snorted, her eyes narrowing as she glared at the helpless Pegasus.
You yourself are on the run from the Royal Guard, which isn't a crime in and of itself. Yet you come to the home of an element of harmony, known princess, and daughter and sister of the members of the Royal Guard, just to check up on a human.
As Twilight talked, she had backed Sunny back into a corner. Closing the gap between them, Twilight leaned in until their faces were barely inches apart.
You best have a very good explanation,
She growled.
I wasn't technically part of their organization.
Sunny's head swept dripping down her brow. I left streaks in her fur as it mixed with the crime present there.
I was hired on as a scout. I looked for humans that were wandering around. That doesn't excuse what you did.
Twilight snarled.
Those humans were in poor condition and suffering from malnutrition. That doesn't just happen overnight. But that wasn't my fault.
Sunny cried, trying to enter on Twilight. Unfortunately for her, the alicorn stood her ground, blocking her route.
I was in charge of locating and retrieving humans. I wasn't responsible for feeding them. That was Rose and Pearl's job. So that makes it okay? Well, no, but that's it. I'm calling the guard.
Twilight huffed, backing up. Sunny's eyes widened as she threw herself upon the ground, grasping at Twilight's hooves.
No, you can't.
She pleaded, tears forming in her eyes.
Why not?
Twilight asked, her voice cold and uncaring. I shivered just hearing it. Glad it's not directed at me. I just sat there watching the scene, hoping that I wouldn't need to intervene.
Because I'm not part of the organization anymore.
Sunny cried, holding tighter to Twilight's hooves.
I left voluntarily. So you're just a rat jumping ship? No!
Sunny screamed, causing Twilight and I to flinch slightly. Upstairs, I heard Spike shifting around in his sleep. Oh, please don't let him wake up. The last thing we need is Princess Celestia to come down herself.
I left before the guards started to hunt us down. I couldn't stand what we were doing anymore, and I decided to make a break for it before things went south. I left shortly after we sold Maxia to Princess Celestia.
She said, waving hoof at me, still clinging to Twilight with the other.
Unfortunately, it was too little, too late. That was nearly 4 months ago.
Twilight said, staring down at the pitiful Pegasus attached to her hooves.
If you did leave then, what have you been doing since then? Trying to find him.
Sunny jabbed a hoof in my direction. Twilight looked over at me with a confused expression. I shrugged slightly, returning the look. Why would she be hunting for me?
Why him?
Asked Twilight, voicing my confusion.
Because he's special.
Sunny gasped, staring up at Twilight with teary eyes. Twilight's eyes widened and she glanced back at me again. I could see the question in her mind and I shook my head back and forth. Sunny doesn't know that I can talk. Twilight understood and nodded once before, returning her attention to Sunny.
How so?
She asked, finally prying her hooves from Sunny's grasp. Rubbing her ankles, she backed away from the Pegasus, just enough to give her some room, but not enough to give her an opening to escape.
He was the first human who didn't fight back against us.
Sunny said, sitting up to her haunches, trying to wipe the tears from her eyes.
He acted almost like he could understand what was going on around him. He was well behaved. He never attempted to attack any of us, and he seemed to just be observing what went on around him. By the sun, he even caught Princess Celestia's eye. You can't tell me that doesn't make him unique. So you went looking for him so you could sell him again?
Asked Twilight slowly. It was a question, not an accusation. She was trying to find out Sunny's motivation.
No,
Sunny said, shaking her head quickly.
never. I tracked him down to make sure that he at least found a good home. You risked capture and imprisonment just to make sure Max was safe?
Twilight asked, studying Sunny closely. Rebecca hung her head, grinning sheepishly.
Well, when you put it that way, it makes it sound pretty silly.
The two mares sat there, neither willing to meet the other's eye. Then they became fascinated with a speck of dirt on the floor, scratching circles around it with her hoof. Twilight just stared at the bookcase behind Sunny, chewing on her lip as she thought. I just kept looking back and forth between the two, waiting for something to happen.
So, what do we do now?
Sunny mumbled, rubbing the back of her head with a hoof. Twilight tilted her head to the side, still chewing her bottom lip. She glanced over to me and frowned slightly. Finally, she spoke.
There's a bathroom up the stairs, second door to the left.
She said, still not looking directly at Sunny.
You should get yourself cleaned up.
Sunny's ears perked up slightly, but she kept her head lowered. Standing up, she limped over to the stairs, beginning to work her way up them. Twilight waited until we heard the bathroom door shut and the sound of running water start before turning to me. She looked tired, stressed, and unhappy.
What the buck do we do now?
Trust her? I signed, getting up from my spot on the cushion and shuffling across the room. I glanced upon the couch and rubbed my eyes, groaning softly.
What? You want to trust her? After everything she's done to you?
Twilight looked aghast at me. She was actually telling the truth when she said that she wasn't responsible for us humans. I signed, stifling a yawn. The only time I ever saw her was for a few hours between feedings.
Just because she wasn't technically responsible for feeding you doesn't mean that it was right for her to just stand by and watch.
Twilight huffed, rolling her eyes.
I still think we should contact the guards, or at least Princess Celeste.
She gave me extra food. Twilight froze, staring at me with her mouth hanging open. She blinked slowly several times before closing her mouth and swallowing.
What?
She stammered. She snuck me extra food when other ponies weren't looking. I leaned back, smiling softly.
She did?
Yes, and I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have made it if it weren't for her. I turned to begin to pace back and forth, brow furrowed as she became lost in thought. As I watched her pace, I fought to keep my eyes open. I was exhausted and I was fighting to stay awake.
So, you don't think I should contact the princess?
Twilight finally said, glancing over her shoulders at me. I shook my head.
Or the guards?
Again, I shook my head.
What would you do then?
I'd let her stay here for a while.
What?
Twilight cried, spinning around and quickly stared at me in shock.
Why would you want to do that?
If she stays here, we can observe her and see if she really is sorry, or just trying to save our hide. I signed, smirking at Twilight's expression. Her eyes darted back and forth, looking at something that wasn't there.
So, basically,
She finally said, speaking slowly as her brain put everything together.
I should have her stay here to watch her and let her earn her pardon?
Exactly.
You really care for her, don't you?
She asked, studying my face closely as she scrunched her face up in a cute manner. Yes. A brief flash of emotion shot across Twilight's face. It was almost sad, hurt. I couldn't quite make it out before it vanished. She was my first, if somewhat unofficial friend here in Equestria. Twilight's ears drooped and she lowered her gaze. I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. Reaching forward, I grasped her chin and lifted her head up, staring into her beautiful violet eyes. Hey, she may have been my first friend, but you are my best friend. I stroked her cheek lovingly, smiling softly at her. A blush slowly spread across Twilight's face as my fingers danced across her fur. And I'm glad that it's you I get to live with. Twilight let out a small smile adorn her face at that. Closing her eyes, she reached up and gently pressed her hoof into my hand. Sighing softly, she opened her mouth to say something, probably to thank me, but was interrupted by a strange gurgling noise coming from the staircase. It sounded like a cross between a gasp and a gag. Breaking away from each other, both Twilight and I glanced towards the source of the noise. Standing at the top of the staircase was Sunny. She gazed down at us with a horrified expression plastered across her face, her bottom jaw almost touching the top step. Her wings were unfurled, water dripping from her feathers. Her eyes darted back and forth between me and Twilight, her pupils the sign of pinpricks. Lifting a trembling hoof, she pointed first at me, then at Twilight, before pointing back at me. She seemed to be having trouble getting her mouth to work.
You and him, but that's... You are... He is... not possible.
She stammered out, her ear flapping madly.
He's human, but he can understand you? That's impossible.
Sunny's eyes twitched before both rolled back into her head and she collapsed. Her limp body slowly began to slide down the stairs, hitting each step of the way down. Twilight and I watched as her body descended the stairs, winching with each thump. She finally reached the bottom, her body lying there in a crumpled heap. We both stared at her for several seconds in silence. I glanced over at Twilight, raising my eyebrow. She just sighed, shaking her head. Standing up, she headed towards the kitchen.
I'll go break out the strong stuff and brew some coffee. This is going to be a long night.
Poor Sunny. Thinks she's going to go find a just particularly interesting human and finds out that he in fact can talk. That's gotta be like world-shattering. Like, I didn't really consider it from Twilight's perspective, but just the fact that you have, it's like if a dog could suddenly talk all the time, it'd be really, I'd probably pass out too if my dog started talking. So I fully understand Sunny in this one. What else I understand are the kindness of my wonderful Patreons. Thank you, my tier 1s, Bounds, Kindness, Chase Lemaster, Dreamless, Portal, Hyperlink, Jason, HK4K, AK Texture, Lord HiE, 9Game, Mecharia, Pony Pony Entertainment, Starlight Blaze, Rain Flicker, and Tyler Perry. My tier 2s, Captain Blueshadow, K Optimist, The Animated Ghost, DJMX 2000, Elemental Wolf, H1 Wolf King, Potato 20, Mr. Crazy, Deacon, Solar Comet, a brand new tier 2, 212th Trooper. Thank you so much for your support, man. Mackenzie McCullough, Nocturne, Papa Lennon, Redeemer of Dark Souls Eclipse, Sword Brother Mordred, Artie Bryant, Riani, Dragon Wolf, and Steel Spark. A large thank you to my previous Titan tiers, Dark Guardian, Danish Dash, Maverick, and User 1842. A large thank you to my current ones, Bis Eclipse, and Silent Titan. I appreciate your guys' support so freaking much, and it means a ton to me. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.